welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Now, the oil price fall and the COVID-19 pandemic has made the Nigerian economy slide into a recession, which the Minister of Finance says the country will come out of in the first quarter of 2021. Well, joining us now to speak on significant policy changes that need to be made to ensure we come out of the recession quickly and what this means for the average man on the streets is the Managing Director of Cowrie Asset Management, Johnson Shuku. Thanks for joining us on the morning show today. Now, let's begin with what we just discussed with regards to the land borders being open. The minister coming out to say that this is something that they are considering. And then the fact that there's been a lot of pressure on the average man, especially because of the increase in the price of food. We've seen a lot of food companies make mini versions of their products. So if it was 100 naira, you can buy it for 50 or 30 naira now. So how urgent would you say the need is for us to reopen this border?
Well, thank you for having me. I'd actually discussed the border closure in one of your programs here. And my position was that if you have to close your borders, it has to be very temporary. And it has to be geared towards addressing a specific and urgent need. Take, for instance, if there's insurgency and they're penetrating your country through the land border, you can close your border temporarily and take a decisive action to flush them out. But you can't close your border for 1 year, 6 months. It has unintended negative consequences, not just to your neighboring countries, but to your own citizens. The land border is a major arterial route for importation of some goods and services. It's also the same route for export of several goods. I mean, that has been clearly highlighted by the fact that the government has granted concession to Dangote Cement, and I understand Bua and maybe one other company, to export through the land borders. It simply means that for the past 1.5 years, the borders were closed. They were shut out of their export market. And therefore, we are prevented from any foreign exchange. Similarly, there are multiple Nigerian businesses that are importing through the land borders or exporting through the land borders. You have actually shut down their businesses. So if we can actually get to a point, we have gotten to a point where we said, really and truly, so we are preventing Dangote from actually expanding his business or Bua from expanding his business, and we have to open the borders for them to export their goods. It sort of follows that we have to apply the same rule to several Nigerians who have the same compelling need to use the land borders to do their businesses.
Yeah, even Peter Side made mention of that. Well, the MBS recent release of Nigeria's inflation rate shows a persistent increase in 14 months, rising by 14.23%. I'll ask you 3 questions following from that. Number 1 is, what does this mean for the country? 2, how does this affect the consumer out there? And where does it leave manufacturers, producers of goods and services, and businessmen like you?
Okay, what does it mean? What does persistent increase in inflation mean for the country? It then means that the average price of goods and services are actually increasing beyond what they were before. For the country, it also follows that the purchasing power of the average income earner, particularly those on fixed income, is declining. So at a macroeconomic level, you are looking at a decrease in the standard of living. And then you're also going to see a slowdown in consumption, which could affect economic productivity, economic production. Because what happens that if your earnings, if the value of your earnings is declining as a result of increase in the price level, you can no longer afford to consume the same quantity of goods and services you are consuming with the same level of income. So it then means you can no longer import or demand for that same quantity of goods. And for the person who is producing those goods, will no longer have commensurate demand for their goods, and they will see a slowdown in their production. So on the macroeconomic level, if you have a high rate of inflation, it slows down economic growth. There is some level of inflation that is good for the economy, and that's always a low single-digit inflation rate. Okay, that's for the country at the macro level. For the individual, I also made allusion to that. The individual who earns salaries, like you and I, or who lives on rental income.
Did you say you and I? Please, let's get the facts.
We are the same level. This one, we are the same level.
Let's get the facts.
So we are seeing an erosion in our income. So it then means that we can no longer afford to provide the same quantity of goods and services we provided to our families. So our standard of living is declining. That's for the individual, for the household, as we call it. Then for the firm, which is for the manufacturers. Now, what has their replacement costs becomes more expensive. Because what is happening is that sometimes they are unable to price in the changes in price level into their prices. And let me explain it to you how it works. A manufacturer, which is what we have seen in some sectors of the industries, where the manufacturers are seeing an increase in their turnover, but they're not seeing an increase in profit. Because their cost is increasing at a rate higher than the rate at which they can reprice their goods. And like I said earlier, the average consumer's ability to demand is weakened. So for the producer, their input cost, what they use to produce the goods, has increased by particularly assume a 14.23%. But they are unable to increase their price by the same 14.23%. So they do a marginal increase in their price, while as there's a significantly higher increase in their cost. So their profit level begins to decline. And for that reason, they are unable to replace their, again, when they need to replace their assets, because when you are a producer, each asset has a lifetime. So you have assets that have 4 years lifetime. And then when you want to replace those assets, you are not able to buy the same assets because the value of the money you need to buy that asset has actually decreased commensurate to the asset. I'll give you an instance. Let's assume you are into transport business. And 4 years ago, you bought your maybe Toyota Corolla, maybe for 4 or 5 million. Okay? Today, you need to spend close to 20 million to buy the same car. And you would have earned that from the use of that vehicle. So you are unable to replace your assets. And you see, in some instances, you see businesses begin to fail because they are not able to replace their asset and their margins are shrinking. So a high rate of inflation is negative in all aspects in any economy. Both for the government or the public finance, then to the households, the individuals, and then to the firm, the companies.
It's a big problem. It's honestly scary. And from what you've said now, it comes off as if this is big problems for business owners, especially in a country where unemployment is high and a lot of people are encouraged to set up businesses. So at a time like this, from everything you've analyzed, if we now add the Naira value and the fact that it has strategically fallen, what you used to buy for maybe 20,000 a few months ago, I mean, you can't obviously get it for the same price now if you used to, buy in foreign currency. So things have strategically changed. For business owners, what's the way forward? What can they do to stay afloat? Because from everything you've explained, they might as well just pack up. Okay.
Interestingly, when your introductory statement, you made allusion to what the business people should do. Because the purchasing power of average consumer has declined, people are now fractionalizing. Okay. Which means you are bulk breaking. People are now converting their products into miniature units so that the average consumers can continue to afford them. And that way, you are still able to sell, maybe not at the same volume you would have sold, but you are still able to appeal to the average consumers. You have broken you have created miniature units of your product so that the person whose income, take for instance, people who used to buy a can of milk, maybe 5,500 naira, for instance. And now you can no longer afford to spend 500 naira for just one tin of milk. And then they now put the milk in sachets. And each sachet can now go for maybe 100 naira. So you may realize that you can buy 2 sachets of 100 naira each and use it to feed your 10 children.
But where does value come in? Because if we're being honest, that 100 naira sachet, in terms of value, you're getting more from the 500 naira tin.
I did say to you earlier that the standard of living of an average fixed income earner declines when you have a high rate of inflation. So those are the facts you have to live with. Yeah. That you can no longer afford to live the way you used to live when your money could command higher value.
Let me ask you this. Where do we lay the cause, or if you like, the blame for this consistent, because that's how it was described, consistent rise in the rate of inflation? COVID, the government, or there are other, if you like, call it extenuating factors? And then maybe you should add, what do we then begin to do, or the government begin to do, to, get the rate of inflation down?
Okay. Let me start with the issue of blame. It's actually, the way I would present the issue of blame is that I wouldn't apportion it to a present government. A couple of things have led to the consistent high double-digit inflation in the country. One, and principally, is the structure of our economy. The structure of the economy is a function of the policies that we have enunciated and implemented in the country in the past couple of years. So it might not have to do exactly with the present government, but it is a duty of the present government to begin the process of changing the structure, to change the narratives. So it's all about policy. And I always make bold to say this, that economic progress, economic development is never an accident. Very few good things happen on earth by accident, very few things. The fact that Japan has remained a strong economy is because of policies. The fact that Germany has remained a strong economy because of economic policies. The fact that Ghana is the preferred destination to both local and foreign investors in Africa is because of policies. The fact that Ethiopia has turned the corner is because of policies. And those policies are driven by quality of leadership. If we get the leadership right, we're going to get the policy environment right. If you get the policy environment right, you may end up with low inflation after some time. It wouldn't be a light bulb effect. You're not going to switch the bulb and then finally you now have a single-digit inflation. But the key thing is the structure is wrong. And I'll tell you some of these structural issues. You have an economy that is not very productive. So the economy is highly dependent on imports. And because the economy has only a monoproduct export, anything that happens to that export affects the flow of foreign currency. Anything that affects the flow of foreign currency will affect your exchange rate. Anything that affects the exchange rate will affect your rate of inflation. You can see the nexus.
Yeah, it's like a circle of light,
yes.
you know.
Yeah.
But you know what we're going to do? We'll talk some more on these policies. We're going to head out to a quick break now. When we come back, we will continue with the conversations.
This is still the Money Show. We still have the Managing Director of Cowrie Asset Management, Johnson Chukwu. Good to still have you here with us. Now, the country has gone into recession. Well, the Minister of Finance is saying, with even the Central Bank Governor who was speaking yesterday, quite optimistic in his postulations, that at least by the end of this year, if certain things are done, or highest first quarter of 2021, we'll get out of recession. But tell us what the government, what further they should be doing to, get us out of recession, and how can businesses, executives or entrepreneurs, where do they come in to help? Because one reason, again, being adduced is the fact that we are a foreign import-dependent nation. That's one of the biggest challenges we seem to have.
Okay, during the break, we were having a conversation. I said, look, the government is beginning to do the right policies, that we may not have the immediate impact, but if we stay on this route, we're likely going to see the economy turn the corner in not too distant future. I'm
not cutting you. Give us an example of, I don't know whether you're coming there, but...
Okay, one of the examples is the Finance Act, Finance Bill of 2020. The Finance Bill has made provision for 50% reduction in what they call minimum tax. Tax is a burden, it's a cost to business operators. At a period of slow economic activities or recession, most countries grant tax waivers or tax holiday to businesses. I had taken us through what had businesses suffering in periods of like this. So the business are looking for capacity to reinvest. If you take out whatever they make, you would reduce their capacity to invest. But the unfortunate thing about minimum tax is that minimum tax is imposed on companies who are not making profit. And you are taxing their revenue. And when you tax their revenue, a company makes a loss, so the company is on the throes of debt.
And you
tax their revenue. And you say it's minimum tax. So you expect them to go and borrow money from who? To pay you the tax. And if they don't pay you, you seal up their premises. And then you are contending with the fact that these companies are going through difficulties. So they are on the verge of sacking staff. You are encouraging them not to sack staff. You have come up with a survival fund to give to companies to pay the salaries of those who are able to retain their businesses. And then at the same time, you are punishing them when you know the macroeconomic environment has made it difficult for them to survive. So the government came up with a finance and said, we're going to reduce the minimum tax. So for me, that is right thinking. That also made provision for some other concessions to taxpayers. And for me, you need to use a fiscal tool to encourage productive activities. And some of those encouragement will be in the form of supporting production instead of supporting consumption. Now takes us to the second aspect. You did mention earlier in our conversation that, look, they are removing subsidy. I said they are not really removing subsidy. What they are doing in effect is that they are pricing the cost of fuel to be cost reflective. They are making the prices to be cost reflective. That we need to go the whole hog in removing subsidy. If you remove subsidy, you are going to take out what they call Petroleum Equalization Fund, which is what they call bridging, where people who are consuming here are subsidizing those who are consuming over there. It's not done. That cannot be a market reflective environment.
Well, the PIB is supposed to take care of that.
The PIB has made provision for what they call administration, which is now going to incorporate the current Petroleum Equalization Fund. So there's no provision fully to eliminate that. If you talk of market reflective, which is what we need to do, because if we continue to increase the price of petrol and we do not go through entire process of deregulation, we're ending up taking the pains without going to get the benefit that should come in future. Okay. As long as you do not have an environment where people can produce and sell based on their cost, and people can buy based on their pocket, you do not have a free market environment. And you're not going to see those refineries.
But today, it looks to me like you're just talking, sorry, before you go.
Okay.
You're just talking the side of business people, because, it's good for businessmen to get a reflective, a good cost to be able to be. But how about the consumers? Because even now, they are crying based on the current price of fuel.
Thank you. I'm happy for that question. Let me take that question frontally. I had said that if you continue to increase the price, we're going to take the pains, which we are all taking, without the benefit. The benefit of a fully deregulated downstream sector is that refineries will come up, refineries will create jobs, refineries will produce feedstock for other industries like the pharmaceutical industry, the plastic industries, and then you're going to have entire expansion in the value chain in the country. The plastic industry will come up without having the import resin. The pharmaceutical industry will take their byproducts from refineries. We will create jobs. We will domesticate our consumption in the sense that the money we are spending on importation of petroleum products will be saved. We will boost our foreign reserve, and then we will see our currency will gain ground. These are the benefits that will come from food deregulation of the sector. If we have not done the food deregulation, we're still importing. So if you continue to import and people are paying the full price they should have paid in the fully regulated market, we are not taking the benefit. And that's why I said we need to go the whole hog.
There's a popular saying, before things get better, they need to get worse. And from what you're explaining, because doing that is going to be so tough on every single person in this country. So that is going to be the going worse before it gets better. Now, I really want us to expatiate on PIB. I like that conversation came up. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, said that the members of the Green Chamber, they are, determined to pass the bill within the next 6 months. However, there are worries from the oil producers and trade section that in its present form, the PIB would not make the Nigerian oil and gas industry compete globally, effectively. I want to get your thoughts on this. And also, let's go back to the situation of the tax revenues. Governor Nasir El-Rufai said that, in fact, increasing VAT is one way that, Nigeria could fix its economic issues. He was preferring solutions, and he said that's one of the ways government can generate revenue to fix its issues. I want you to expatiate on these two issues.
Okay, on the PIB, I just mentioned an element of the PIB. There is a provision for the administrator, admin, I think that's what they call it, that is going to take on what they call PPPRA, Petroleum Product Pricing Regulatory Agency, and the Petroleum Equalization Fund, they will be housed under that admin. So in effect, you are still going to have an agency that will regulate prices, an agency will equalize. And as long as you have equalization, you do not have deregulation. So some of the elements, but the good thing as the legislator, the head of one of the legislative chamber that was speaking, is their duty, because they're the one that will pass the law. The bill is their duty to revise the bill and present it in a format that will allow for the Nigerian oil and gas sector to be competitive.
Okay.
The earlier versions had provisions for what you call incorporated joint ventures, where the joint venture arrangement under which the NNPC goes into joint venture with the major oil companies will be incorporated and run as different business entities. And therefore do not have to depend on the government for cash calls. They can go to the international market and borrow. They will price their costs appropriately based on market dynamics. Unlike what we have today, where the international oil majors are the one bringing the input and dropping prices on us based on whatever they consider as the appropriate prices. And therefore, we have a higher cost of production of crude than you have in other countries, because those costs are already padded up by the international oil companies. If you have incorporated joint ventures, those things won't happen. And we should need to go back. But the good thing that the National Assembly is speaking about this, and they have a duty, it's their primary duty to come up with the appropriate legislation that will ensure that the country's upstream.
And then the need for the modular refineries also to come up. But quickly, let me just drop this and then we'll let you go. We don't have all the time. Some states seem to be faring better than others in inflation numbers, from what I gathered. How does the inflation rate of the states help, or otherwise, or the entire economy?
Well, it depends on, you have a basket of about 13 items that are used to measure inflation. It depends on how each of these influence on you. If you're a major food producer, and remember that food inflation is one of the critical elements of inflation. For instance, the last month of inflation, the food inflation was about 17.38%. Yeah. So if you're a food producer and you have transport availability, you're going to have a lot.
I feel this is a conversation
I wish I could have continued. We could have continued.
It's endless, honestly.
All right, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us in the morning show.
Thank you, Kachi.